During the Chinese Civil War from 1946 to 1950, leading up to the Taiwan Strait conflict, what military uniforms did the Republic of China Army actually wear? In many movies, nationalist soldiers are portrayed wearing American military uniforms. Is this portrayal accurate? However, looking at historical photos, there are few images of nationalist soldiers in American military uniforms. What uniforms did the nationalist forces wear during the Civil War? In reality, after the victory in the War of World War II, only a very small number of nationalist forces switched to American military uniforms. This transition was mainly seen in elite units such as the new 1st Army, new 6th Army, paratroopers, armored units, etc. The majority of regular field units continued to wear domestically produced uniforms. Here is the classification of the Nationalist Army uniforms during the Civil War period, with a side note on the situation of the military uniforms after the victory in the Second Sino-Japanese War. It's worth noting that post-World War II modifications to the Nationalist Army uniforms were not formally codified through legislation, but rather underwent continuous changes through administrative orders. It wasn't until 1952 that people began to take notice of this lack of formal regulation, and the official legislation was not enacted until 1959. However, by the time the legislation was formally introduced, the uniforms of the Nationalist Army forces had already undergone significant changes and were no longer identical to those of the Civil War era. During the Civil War period, the dress uniform for officers became quite elaborate, featuring both winter and summer uniforms, as well as additional components such as winter overcoats and casual uniforms for outdoor use during both seasons. Various styles of American jackets were adopted, and there was even a type of open-collar service dress uniform exclusively worn by a select few high-ranking officers. Below, we will sequentially introduce each of these different service dress uniform. The service dress uniform. Between 1946 and 1950, there were continuous modifications to the details of officers' formal service dress uniform. Starting from January 1, 1946, the option of the dress hat was added to the officer's formal dress uniform. However, due to the vast size of the Chinese forces, the transition to the new uniform was not swift. Therefore, before the summer of 1946, many officers continued to wear different hats and belts. In the summer of 1946, officers began transitioning to the new style formal dress uniform with shoulder straps, simultaneously discontinuing accessories such as the mountain cap, armed belt, and Chiang Kai-shek sword. The changeover to the new uniform was not immediate, and there was a period of overlap with the old-style uniforms, especially leading up to winter. During this time, officers could be seen wearing a mix of old and new uniforms, and the rank insignia, still in the rectangular shape from World War II, had not been replaced. In the spring of 1947, the new-style branch rank insignia was gradually issued. Officers began wearing American-style branch insignia on the collar and new-style epaulettes on the shoulders. The original rectangular collar patches were gradually phased out, and the rank sleeve lines, distinguishing between three ranks: general in red, major to colonel officers in yellow, and warrant officer to captain officers in blue. In the summer of 1948, the design of the formal service dress uniform was simplified, eliminating the cloth belt and rank sleeve lines. Simultaneously, between 1946 and 1948, there was a type of open-collar dress uniform worn exclusively by a select few high-ranking officers and generals. This open-collar service dress uniform was quite rare and was only worn by a minority of officers and generals who personally procured it. This uniform did not appear as frequently as depicted in mainland Chinese TV dramas. There were various styles of winter overcoats, with the most commonly seen being the standard long overcoat. This coat retained the style from the early wartime period, but incorporated shoulder straps for displaying ranks. The buttons were also changed to feature the national emblem. The casual uniforms adopted in 1943 is a shirt-style attire. In comparison to general military casual wear, It is a more lightweight and formal outfit. After the summer of 1946, officers added the shoulder strap design to the uniform. Following the summer of 1947, similar to the formal dress uniform, officers wore branch insignia on the collar and epaulettes on the shoulders. The decision to wear a tie depended on the occasion. Additionally, there was a distinction between summer and winter uniforms, with khaki cotton used for summer and woolen for winter. While the majority of the Nationalist Army during the Chinese Civil War primarily used domestically produced military equipment, there were instances of American-style clothing. However, it wasn't as widespread as depicted in movies, and the entire military didn't adopt American-style equipment on the scale seen in the South Korean military. Only a small number of personnel and units utilized various types of American military overcoats and jackets provided through military aid. The following analysis will delve into the American military overcoats and jackets used by the Nationalist Army during the Chinese Civil War. Mackinaw coat, also known as Jeep coat, adopted around 1940s early, was also adopted by the Nationalist Army. It was mainly purchased by officers themselves, but there have been instances of enlisted soldiers wearing it as well. Armored units also extensively used this jacket. The design of this jacket is diverse and doesn't have a fixed style. Eisenhower jacket. Before the 1950s, the Eisenhower jacket was not part of the standard issue for the Nationalist Army, but many officers would purchase it themselves, particularly those in armored and airborne units. However, due to its non-standard status, there was no official regulation regarding its wear, resulting in various styles. It wasn't until the early 1950s that the Nationalist Army officially established the proper uniform regulations for wearing the Eisenhower jacket. Summer 1941 field jacket. This jacket was more commonly worn by both officers and enlisted personnel, primarily used by armored units and airborne troops. M1943 field jacket. It is aid from the United States to China, and both officers and soldiers use it, but the quantity is not substantial and was often mixed and matched with both service dress uniform and field service uniforms. M1947 field jacket. In addition to the M1947, there is also the older M1945 model. Both jacket styles are similar. These types of jackets are relatively rare domestically, and there have been only a few sightings, notably among Nationalist Army troops engaged in operations in the Manchuria. Various types of Japanese military coats. In Manchuria, the former Manchukuo Army and remnants of the Japanese Kwantung Army left behind numerous military supplies. Among them, winter coats were extensively adopted by the Nationalist Army because the winter equipment abandoned by the Manchukuo Army and Japanese forces proved highly practical in the severe cold of Manchuria. There are records of the Nationalist Army capturing and using the Type 3 coats from the North China battlefield. Field service uniforms for officers and soldiers. In the early months of 1946, the field service uniforms for officers and soldiers remained consistent with those worn during the wartime resistance, wearing grey-blue winter uniform. During the summer of the same year, the entire military force underwent a uniform transition to the new style of grass yellow uniforms paired with dress hat. This new attire served to further distinguish between officers and enlisted personnel compared to the World War II period. Officers' uniforms were enhanced with shoulder straps and rank-specific sleeve lines. Field service uniform and dress hat. In the summer of 1946, the military adopted the use of the dress hat as part of the standard dress uniform. The field hat originally used during the resistance period were reassigned for use by security forces. However, the dress hat posed challenges for wearing with steel helmets, leading to a directive in 1948 to discontinue its use in the summer. The military reverted to the original wartime-style field hat for summer wear and winter ear-covering field cap. In the winter of 1946, the military introduced a special ear-covering version of dress hat. However, following the discontinuation of the dress hat for all ranks in the summer of 1948, the winter uniform was standardized to include the ear-covering field cap. Despite this change, officers could still be observed using the dress hat in frontline situations. Officers continued to use the dress hat, and it remained in use by the Capital Guard units and military academies. In addition to the aforementioned military hats, there is also the boat-shaped hat. However, the boat-shaped hat is not widely adopted and is typically reserved for use by paratroopers and elite forces during gatherings and parades. Also, there were a few units with unique uniforms such as the paratroopers. They adopted uniforms made from American-supplied HBT in a grass green color, although this was not common. Summer Field Service Uniform for Officers. The summer dress uniform for military officers includes shoulder straps and a solid pocket design at the lower hem. It features a cloth belt and can be paired with riding pants, Western-style trousers, or shorts. During summer operational training, officers typically wear riding breeches, while for routine office work, official functions, or other static occasions, they opt for Western-style trousers. In hot weather, officers may switch to wearing shorts. The choice of trousers is determined by the specific context and occasion. Winter Field Service Uniform for Officers. During the winter season, officers have the option of choosing between Western-style trousers and riding breeches. When wearing wadded jacket Western-style trousers, officers typically do not use leg wraps, suitable for outings and office wear. However, during combat or training exercises, officers switch to riding breeches. It's not uncommon to see officers wearing riding pants without leg wraps in these situations. During combat, officers utilize domestically manufactured equipment, American-supplied gear, and occasionally some Japanese equipment. The emphasis was on lightweight gear, primarily including pistol binoculars, and in some cases, submachine guns. Summer Field Service Uniform for Soldiers. For soldiers and non-commissioned officers during the summer, the uniform closely resembles the style from the World War II era. The jackets have flat pockets and do not feature shoulder straps. Depending on the weather, soldiers switch between Western-style trousers and shorts, often tying leg wraps when wearing shorts. Military branches that require horseback riding, such as artillery, cavalry, and baggage units, may opt for riding pants. Leather belts are typically worn, although there are instances of using cloth belts. Winter Field Service Uniform for Soldiers. The winter uniform for soldiers closely resembles that of the World War II era, appearing quite voluminous. Interestingly, during heavy snowfall, the clothing could be reversed to enhance camouflage effectiveness. When wearing winter attire, soldiers primarily opt for riding breeches, as the winter cotton padded design is tailored to this style for increased mobility. However, in some war zones, soldiers can be observed wearing Western-style trousers, possibly due to variations in the production of military uniforms by logistics units in different regions. Winter cotton padded coats for officers and enlisted personnel. This type of coat is uniform for both officers and enlisted personnel, lacking any distinctions of rank. It is designed for use in extremely cold conditions. Officers and soldiers' field casual uniforms. The field casual uniforms became more standardized after the summer of 1946, primarily distinguishing between officers and soldiers. Officers had shoulder straps, while soldiers did not. This type of uniform is designed for wear in hot environments. The pants options were similar to the summer field service uniforms, with officers having the choice of riding breeches, trousers, or shorts. Soldiers typically wore trousers or shorts, while troops in cavalry units or those with equestrian needs would wear riding breeches. This type of clothing became the main attire for the summer in 1951. The shift was mainly due to the hot climate in Taiwan after the relocation, as the traditional field service uniforms was not well suited for the tropical weather, and the shirt-style field utility uniform proved to be more appropriate for the climate in Taiwan. Soldiers in combat sometimes adopted American aid-provided equipment, but such units were not widespread, for example, among paratroopers. The majority relied on the abundant Japanese equipment captured during the war or used domestically produced gear as seen in the reorganized 74th Division. There were also instances of unique combinations featuring a mix of American, Japanese, and domestically produced equipment, exemplified by the 67th Division. Many units were equipped entirely with Japanese or domestically produced gear. Also, the new First Army and new Sixth Army were known to wear British-style equipment from the early days of the Expeditionary Force period. Later on, they also wore a mix of domestically produced American and British-style equipment. In essence, a variety of outfit combinations existed. During the Civil War period, was the color of the Nationalist Army uniforms completely unified? After the summer of 1946, were there other colors besides grass yellow and grass green? Yes, but not many. A very small number of units continued to wear gray or blue uniforms. Most of these units were security forces rather than regular army units. Some nationalist troops stationed in Beiping also wore gray-blue uniforms. Between 1949 and 1951, the Nationalist Army introduced khaki uniforms in response to shortages in material supplies. Due to the poor quality of uniforms during the Civil War period, fading issues were still prevalent, leading many uniforms to eventually fade into a khaki or off-white appearance. Another question that many people have is about the cap insignia of the Nationalist Army during the Civil War period. What color was it exactly? In fact, after the summer of 1946, there was a gradual shift towards adopting cap insignias with a red circle. The cap insignia with a red circle represents the national flag, which is also the national emblem. This change was in preparation for the constitutional government on December 25, 1947, symbolizing the transformation of the National Revolutionary Army into the Republic of China Armed Forces. It signified the nationalization of the military forces, implying that all former regional warlord forces were no longer warlord or local military, but had become national armed forces receiving state funding. Interestingly, during the early stages of the Civil War, the Communist Army continued to extensively use the early Nationalist Army's blue sky and white sun cap insignias, while the majority of the Nationalist Army had already switched to the style with a red circle. Later, after the retreat to Taiwan, around 1951, there was a gradual discontinuation of the red circle on the cap insignia. Some say that the combination of the red circle and the blue sky and white sun symbol represented being surrounded by the Communist Party, carrying an inauspicious connotation. However, in reality, it was due to the political party-oriented transformation of the Nationalist Army after moving to Taiwan. Therefore, the red circle was discontinued, and the cap insignia was changed to feature the emblem of the Kuomintang. In summary, during the Chinese Civil War, the Nationalist Army did not have entire units dressed in uniforms similar to the US military. This depiction only exists in mainland Chinese films, exaggerating the image of the Nationalist Army during the war. However, it cannot be denied that there were instances of the use of American military uniforms during the conflict, specifically in terms of accessories and jackets, blended with domestically produced clothing. The proportion of American uniforms and equipment within the Chinese military was not significant. The quantity of American steel helmets issued during the Civil War was even less than that of Japanese helmets. Interestingly, the People's Liberation Army effectively utilized captured American equipment from the Nationalist Army's stockpiles in 1949, including US military aid provided to the Soviet Union during World War II. Towards the later of the war, during events like the defense of Shanghai, PLA forces can be seen making extensive use of American equipment and weapons in visual records. Additionally, in the early 1950s, there were instances of the PLA producing equipment like pouches for M1 carbine magazines. In essence, the Nationalist Army did not adopt American military attire to the extent imagined, and similarly, the PLA did not exhibit a purely Soviet-style appearance as often depicted. This episode concludes here. Friends who enjoyed our content, remember to subscribe and share.